Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Okay, so today I'm going to be reading some quotes from some Frank Herbert books, The Eyes of Heisenberg, The Heaven Makers, and The Santaroga Barrier, and I think I might be reading one or two quotes from The Penultimate Barrier by, what's his name, Philip K. Dick. So that is what I'm going to be doing in this video, and hopefully you guys get something out of it. Okay, the first one is this little quote from The Eyes of Heisenberg. It says, "The folk had a saying, in this world there are two worlds, one that works and lives, in this world there are two worlds, one that works not and lives forever, and one that lives not and works forever." So I thought that was really quite a good quote. I mean, that is really how it is today. I mean, most people really are financial slaves, and the people at the top do not give a fuck. They know it's this way, they just don't care. I mean, maybe a tiny percentage of them do, but most of them really don't give a shit at all. They think they're better than everybody just because they have, smarter genes, better looking faces, etc. And they're like, well, who cares? We're the lucky few and we get to be rich and do nothing, and they have to work their asses off and get almost nothing out of it. Just enough money to survive so that they can continue working and being slaves. I mean, it's truly appalling what these monsters at the top tolerate because they think they're better than the average person. And then the second quote says, "I have looked," and this is of course many pages later. "I have looked." Eigen shook his head. Svengard was being more pig-headed than they'd expected. He screened out contrary evidence and stuck to the old formulas. "You want them to succumb?" "You want them to succumb," Svengard accused. "Why do you want this?" "Because they've deprived us of evolution," Eigen said. Svengard stared at him. "What?" "They've made themselves the only free individuals in our world," Eigen said. "But individuals don't evolve. Populations evolve, not individuals. We have no population." "But the folk—" "Yes, the folk. Who among us are allowed to mate?" Eigen shook his head. "You're a gene surgeon, man. Haven't you identified the pattern yet?" "Pattern? What pattern? What do you mean?" Svengard pushed himself up in the chair, cursed his bindings. His arms and legs felt numb. "The Optimen hold the one cardinal rule of mating," Eigen said. "Return to the standard average. They allow a random interchange with the standard average organism to suppress development of unique individuals. Such few unique individuals as occur are not allowed to breed." Svengard shook his head. "I don't believe you," he said. But he could feel the beginnings of doubt. His own case, no matter which mate he chose, the breeding permit was denied. He'd examined the genetic matchings himself, had seen configurations he would have sworn were viable, but the Optimen said no. "You do believe me," Eigen said. "But look at the long lives they give us," Svengard said. "I can expect almost 200 years. "Medicine does that, not the Optimen," Eigen said. "Delicate, careful refinement of the enzymic prescription is the key. That plus a proscribed life in which emotional upset is held to a minimum. Selected exercises and a diet chosen for your specific needs. It could be done for almost anyone." "Indefinite life?" Svengard whispered. "No, but long life, much longer than we get now. I'm going on 400 years myself, as are several of my contemporaries. Almost 400 lovely years," he said, remembering Callapin's vicious phrase. Callapin is one of the Optimen. And Norse's chuckle. Norse is another one of the Optimen. 400? You? Svengard asked. "I agree, it's nothing compared to their many thousands," Eigen said, "but almost anyone could have these years, except they don't permit it." "Why?" Svengard asked. "This way they can offer the bonus years to the selected few, a reward for service. Without this rule, they have no coin to buy us. You knew this. You've been trying to sell yourself to them for this coin all your life." Svengard looked down at his bound hands. "Is that my life?" He wondered. "Fettered hands? Who will buy my fettered hands?" "And you should hear Norse chuckle at my pitiful 400 years, Eigen said. "Norse?" "Yes, Norse of the Tier. Norse the cynic, Norse of the more than 40,000 years. Why do you think Norse is a cynic? There's older Optimen, much older. Most of those aren't cynics." "I don't understand," Svengard said. He stared at Eigen, feeling weak, battered, unable to counter the force of these words and arguments. "I forget you're not of Central. They classify themselves by the tiny bit of emotion they're permitted. They're actionists, emotionals, cynics, hedonists, and defeats. They passed through cynicism on their way to hedonism. The Tuyere already well occupied in pursuit of personal pleasure. There's a pattern here, too, and none of it's good. Eigen studied Svengard, weighing the effect of his words. Here was a creature barely above the folk. He was a medieval man. To him, Central Neoptomen were the primum mobile, in control of all celestial systems. Beyond Central lay only the Empyrean home of the Creator, and for the Svengards of the world there was little distinction between Optiman and Creator. Both were higher than the moon and totally without fault. Where can we run? Svengard asked. There's no place to hide. They control the enzymic prescriptions. The minute one of us walks into a pharmacy for renewal, that's the end. We have our sources, Svengard said. But why would you want me? Svengard asked. He kept his eyes on his bindings. Because you're a unique individual. Because Potter wants you. Because you know of the Durant embryo. The Durant embryo, Svengard thought. What's the significance of the Durant embryo? It all comes back to that embryo. He looked up and met Eigen's eyes. You find it difficult to see the Optimen in my description of them, Eigen said. Yes. They're a plague on the face of the earth, Eigen said. They're the earth's disease. Svengard recoiled from the bitterness of Eigen's voice. Saul has erased his thousands and David his 10,000s, Eigen said. But the Optimen erase the future. So that was that quote. I thought that was really good. That is absolutely how it is today. They act like, like progress comes from, liberalism or government or fiat currency or welfare or any of these things. No, that's technology that's giving those whatever benefits that we may get from these things. It's not the government or welfare or liberalism or any of this nonsense. That's not doing anything for us. You see what I'm saying? Like, we could have all the advantages of liberalism and the insanity, without any of the insanity. We could have all the advantages that we have today under anarcho-capitalism and none of the downsides. None of the tyranny, none of the dysgenics, none of the just none of the madness, none of the childishness, etc., etc. They absolutely they enslave us, and then they use the little bit extra freedom that they can grant you if you become part of the Illuminati or whatever. Like, they use that little extra freedom as the coin to buy people, even though people of the past, 100 years ago, had more than that freedom without having to sell themselves to the Illuminati. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is so accurate. Like, that is the coin that they use to buy us, these extra advantages that really could be given to anybody, but they're just choosing to withhold them so that they can offer that as a bribe to people who will sell out to their bullshit slavery system. You see, that really is how it is. And it says, Saul has erased his thousands, David his 10,000s, but the Optimen erased the future. That is also absolutely how it is. Like, the people of today, they really are erasing the future. They're wiping out the white race through promoting miscegenation. They're, destroying the environment, locking everything down. So there's more and more and more and more government control of or corporate control of absolutely everything, including reproduction. That's their end goal. They want to get men, and MGTOW serves this goal perfectly. They want men to just give up on procreating so that they can take control, the government and the corporation can take control of all the women, and then make it so that you need a permit to breed. And then you can't breed anymore, even if you want to, unless you get government or corporate approval. You see, and then you can probably only breed with who they let you breed with. This is what we're heading toward. This is what they want. And MGTOW, by walking away, instead of fighting for regaining control over women, MGTOW is allowing this to happen. MGTOW is making it easier for the elites to gain control of women and make it so that you need a permit to breed at all. This is what we're heading toward. It really is. And as far as, the Optimen being a plague on the face of the earth, they're the earth's disease. Yes, this is how it is. These so-called elites, the Illuminati, the people in high levels in government, even not that high levels, they're serving the machine, but mainly the people in charge who know what's really going on. The heads of CIA and NSA and the DIA, the heads of, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, all these people, these people are monsters. The president, the senators, the congressmen, the banksters, the Rothschilds, Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein. These people are absolute monsters. Truly, truly monsters. I mean, not literally, but basically almost literally. I mean, they are demonic monsters. They really, really do not give a shit about human life at all. Not even the tiniest little bit. They really, really do not give a shit about stealing trillions and trillions of dollars. They really do not give a shit about how much they destroy the financial system. They don't care at all. They are just absolute monsters. They really are a plague on the face of the earth. These people are. There really is just no way around that. You know, you have to see them for what they are, and because only when you see them for what they are you then, even will you even then begin to, get angry enough about it to, advocate for violent revolutionary war if necessary, you know? And then here's another quote from that same book. Nurse sat weeping. They are all dead. They are dead, all dead, he thought. Dead. The word felt peculiar in his mind, devoid of personal meaning. It was a term that could be applied to bacteria, perhaps, or to weeds. One sterilized an area before bringing in lovely flowers. Why do I weep? He tried to remember if he'd ever wept before. Perhaps there was a time when I wept, he thought, but it was so long ago. Ago. Time. Wept. They were words suddenly without meaning. That's the trouble with endless life, he thought. With too much repetition, everything loses meaning. So, yeah, I wanted to mention that as well, because I think that is really true. That probably will become a problem in the future. Things will cease to mean anything once life gets long enough. Once there is no more death, once we've conquered aging, once society is peaceful enough that there's no more death, it probably will become a big problem, that life will become meaningless. This also kind of reminds me of that H.P. Lovecraft story, the Mound, where he goes underground and then he finds this whole ancient race, this civilization where they're like really, really advanced. They can like teleport by their mind's thoughts and do stuff like that, really advanced stuff, right? And yet they're super decadent. They have these tournament things where like there are these atrocities. I think there's like, barbaric, violent atrocities, but also I think there's like a ton of horrific sexual degradation and stuff. And all because these guys are super technologically advanced and live forever. And so they just become more and more decadent, more and more uncaring about violence and degeneracy and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I think that is a huge problem. I mean, we're already seeing the massively increased hedonism, even not just in women, but in men as well. The nihilism, the callousness, we're already seeing a massive increase of this due to technological advancement. And considering how far technology could advance over the next several thousand years, or tens of thousands of years, like what all the technological development we have now is nothing. So consider like how bad the degradation and horrificness will become if we don't bring back morality, if we don't use that to temper the corrupting effect of technology. You know what I'm saying? So I think this is something that's really important to understand. It really is important that we realize that, with repetition, things do lose meaning, right? And this doesn't just have to do with long life, though. It also has to do with wealth, right? Like when you're super rich, nothing means anything anymore because everything can be obtained with ease. Even if you're hideously ugly, you can always hire a high-class call girl to sleep with you. You know what I mean? Even if you're an idiot, you can take like the most advanced courses, hire a tutor to teach you about stuff. You know what I mean? It's like money can overcome all barriers pretty much. So, these kind of people, nothing really means anything to the rich. And so they just become totally corrupted the same way that people who would have endless life in the future will become corrupted. It's a big problem. And I think people need to think about that. So that was what I wanted to read from that book. And then let's see, here's a quote. I got some quotes from the Santaroga barrier. See, by the way, the Eyes of Heisenberg is about, the Optimen, and they live forever, literally tens of thousands of years long, and they control reproduction, and it's about these people who create this one gene surgeon. All people are created, like, not the old-fashioned way through sex, but they take, like, a sperm and, like, an egg, and then they put them together and they surgically mess with it to make it better or whatever, or see if it can become an Optiman, and if not, then, they decide to keep it or not or whatever. But then, the gene surgeon guy sees that, oh, wow, something unique happened in the process of editing this gene editing this thing, so I'm going to, make it, or I'm going to keep it. I'm not going to kill it like I'm supposed to. I'm going to keep it because this thing is viable. Like like in the world of the Eyes of Heisenberg, like people can't breed anymore. I think no one can breed. I mean, people are allowed to breed, but they're not. I think no one is able to breed naturally the old-fashioned way. But this embryo could grow up to be a person who can breed the old-fashioned way, and therefore can bring back old-fashioned reproduction and natural, eugenic evolution through, natural breeding and all that, rather than it all being controlled by the Optimans. So it's this kind of like war to get the embryo out and like defeat the Optimen and stuff like that. It's a pretty good book. It's pretty short though. It's like most of Frank Herbert's non-Dune books. It's quite short, but maybe a couple hundred pages, maybe 250 pages or something. But this one that I'm going to read from the Santaroga Barrier, it's about this community that these advertisers are trying to like find a way into or whatever. They've sent a few investigators already, but all of them failed. So they're sending in a new guy. They've sent in this new guy, and they're trying to find what it is about this community that totally resists like the new modern world and stuff. It's almost like they're a version of the Amish or something, although they're much more sophisticated than that. They do use technology, but they really want nothing to do with the outside world, and nobody can seem to get a toehold in selling to this market of this little town or city or whatever it is. And so I think it's more like a town or a small city. And so that this guy is sent in and he's like investigating them, and he finds out that they have this stuff. I can't Jaspers, that's what they call it. And they infuse their food with this stuff in this cave with this drug called Jaspers that is like in the air somehow of this cave. And so then the Jaspers, you eat the food infused with the Jaspers, and it's like LSD or something. It makes you like, it enhances your mind. It like makes you much smarter and everything like that. But it also kind of like increases your instinctiveness and unconsciousness as well. It's just very interesting. But I wanted to read some quotes from that. It says, let's see here. Jaspers is something wonderful. We call it a consciousness fuel. It opens your eyes and your ears. It turns on your mind. She broke off, smiled at him. But you already know. I know what it appears to be, he said. He glanced at the bag in his hand. Why did he hold here? Was it a paradisical? What did he hold here? Was it a paradisical gift for all mankind or something out of hell? Was it the evil enchantment he'd pictured or an ultimate freedom? It's wonderful, and you know it by now, Jenny said. Then why aren't you all shouting it from the rooftops, he demanded. Gil, she stared at him accusingly. Abruptly, Dayson thought of what Meyer Davidson's reaction would be. Davidson and his cohorts, the eager young executives and the hard-eyed older men. What he held here in his hand was their enemy. To those men in their oddly similar dark suits, their cold eyes weighing and dismissing everything, the people of this valley were a foe to be defeated. As he thought of it, Dayson realized all customers were the enemy to these men. Davidson and his kind were pitted against each other. Yes, competitive. But among themselves they betrayed that they pitted more against the masses who existed beyond that inner ring of knowledgeable financial operation. The alignment was apparent in everything they did, in their words as well as their actions. They spoke of package grab level and container flash time, of puff limit and acceptance threshold. It was an in language of military-like maneuvering in combat. They knew which height on a shelf was most apt to make a customer grab an item. They knew the flash time, the shelf width needed for certain containers. They knew how much empty air could be puffed into a package to make it appear a greater bargain. They knew how much price and package manipulation the customer would accept without jarring him into a rejection pattern. And we're their spies, Dayson thought. The psychiatrists and the psychologists, all the social scientists, we're the espionage arm. He sensed the vast maneuvering of these armies, the conspiracy to maintain the enemy in a sleepy state of unawareness, malleable. Whatever the leaders of these armies did amongst themselves to each other, they maintained their inner code. No one betrayed the real war. Dyson never before viewed the market study world in quite this way. He thought of the brutal honesty in Santaroga's advertising, crumpled the neck of the paper bag in his hand. What was this stuff doing to him? He turned away from Jenny to hide a surge of anger. It was making him imagine crazy things. Armies. There was no way to avoid Jaspers here in Santaroga. The investigation required that he not avoid it. I must insinuate myself into their minds, he reminded himself. I must live their life, think as they think. He saw the situation then as Jenny and her fellow Santarogans must see it. They were involved in a form of guerrilla warfare. They had achieved a way of life which would not be tolerated by the outside. Santaroga offered too much of a threat to the oligarchs of the money industry world. The only hope for Santaroga lay in isolation and secrecy. Shout it from the rooftops indeed. No wonder she'd snapped at him in surprise. Dyson turned, looked at Jenny standing there patiently, waiting for him to think his way through the maze. She smiled encouragingly at him, and he suddenly saw all Santarogans through her. They were the Buffalo Indians, people who needed to get away by themselves, to live and hunt in the way their instincts told them. The trouble was, they lived in a world which couldn't be culturally neutral. That world out there would keep trying to make people, all people, be everywhere alike. Straddling both worlds, thinking with the drug and thinking with his memories of the outside, he felt a deep sadness for Jenny. Santaroga would be destroyed. No doubt of that. I'm sure you see it, Jenny said. Jaspers would be equated with LSD, with narcotics. Let's see. He said, it'd be legislated against, as the Santaroga hashish. You'd be sneered out of existence, destroyed. I never doubted you'd understand once you're exposed, she said. She moved into his arms, leaned against him, hugging him fiercely. I trusted you, Gil. I knew I couldn't be wrong about you. So that was pretty much all I wanted to read. This is really, really, really true. This is how it is. And this is another, again, pretty much a great description of the Illuminati. Like, they're at war with each other, but they're more at war against the 99%. And their code is that they don't betray each other to the 99%. They don't expose themselves and their collusion with each other against the 99%. They don't expose that to the 99%. You know, they fight amongst each other, and a lot of them hate each other, but they are at war with the 99% more. Not so much because we've done anything wrong or anything, but because they probably both arrogantly think that they're better than us, and they view us as, like, you know, the way that vampires would view regular people, assuming vampires were real. You know, vampires would view regular people as their food, as their cattle, as their you know, something to be preyed upon. Well, the elites view us as their sheeple to be preyed upon, and so they don't want to expose, you know, what they're really about to us, because that would make it so that we would fight back, and then they wouldn't be able to prey off us and feed off of us anymore. You see, so I wanted to say that. I wanted to read that. I mean, it's just that really is true. You know, like they have it all down to a science, exactly how much air they can put into a package of chips before you're going to start to think that this is a total ripoff, etc. You know, it really is like that, and it's all down to a science, and they really want to know as much as they can so they can manipulate us as much as possible. And that's all science does. If we don't rebel, science just puts more and more and more and more knowledge, and therefore power, in the hands of the elites, and that is all knowledge that they use against us, to manipulate us more effectively, to surveil us more effectively, etc., etc., etc. And things will just get worse and worse and worse for the common people unless the common people fight back. It really is that simple. You know, so we got to have the balls to fight back. And then here's something else I wanted to read. He says, let's see, Dyson thought of a fortress abbey in the Dark Ages, warrior monks. All this was contained in Piaget and his valley, and the confidence with which Santarogans defied the outside. Were they really confident, he wondered, or were they actors hypnotized by their own performance? And then Piaget says, you've been a swimmer on the surface. You haven't even seen the struggle. You haven't yet developed the innocent eye that sees the universe uncluttered by past assumptions. You were programmed and sent here to break us up. Dyson paled. To be programmed is to be prejudiced, Piaget said, because prejudice is selecting and rejecting, and that is programming. He sighed. Such pains we take with you because of our Jenny. And that was why he has not yet been, you know, like totally rejected or whatever by the community, and why they're trying to enlighten him, because he used to know that girl, Jenny, who is one of the Santarogans. And he, I think, always loved her or something, and so she, like, contacted him, and then so he came back, and then he got to know her again, and then he started, you know, developing feelings for her again. But at the same, so the community kind of views him as like a potential ally, but at present still sort of an enemy, because he could still betray them to the outside. So they're trying to enlighten him so that he'll join them, you know. And that's why it says, such pains we take with you because of our Jenny. And then he says, I came here with an open mind, Dyson said. And then Piaget raised his eyebrows and says, not prejudiced? And then he says, And then Dyson says, so you're contending with groups outside over what's the right way. And then Piaget says, contending is too soft a word, Dyson. There's a power struggle going on over control of the human consciousness. We are a cell of health, surrounded by plague. It's not men's minds that are at stake, but their consciousness, their awareness. This isn't a struggle over a market area. Make no mistake about it, this is a struggle over what's to be judged valuable in our universe. Outside, they value whatever can be measured, counted, or tabulated. Here, we go by different standards. In other words, they have human compassion and they value nature and they value the intangible things of life, like happiness and virtue, things that actually make life worth living. Um, so, that is quite accurate. That really is how it is. Let's see here. And then Dyson, oh, this is another quote, so quite a few pages later. Dyson says, so outsiders attack their gods? And then Bordeaux says, anything less than abject submission has to have some attack in it, Bordeaux said. You try to change a god? What's that except accusing the god of not agreeing with you? And then Dyson says, and you get all this from the TV? And then Bordeaux says, all this from, he broke into a chuckle, oh no, Dr. Gill, you don't mind if I call you Dr. Gill. Dyson turned to stare at the questioning look on Bordeaux's face. Dr. Gill. To object would be to appear the stiff-necked fool. But Dyson felt that agreement would be a step backward, the loss of an important battle. He could see no way to object, though. Whatever you wish, Dyson said. Just explain this about the TV. That's our window on the outside, Bordeaux said. That whole world of the permanent expediency out there. That whole world is TV, and we watch it through... Permanent expediency? Dyson tried to raise himself on his elbows, but the effect set his burned arms to throbbing. He sank back, kept his gaze on Bordeaux. Why, of course, sir. The outside works on the temporary expedient, Dr. Gill. You must know that. And the temporary always turns into the permanent, somehow. The temporary tax, the necessary little war, the temporary brutality that will cease as soon as certain conditions end. The government agency created for the permanent interim. And then Dyson says, so you watch the news broadcasts and get all this from... And then Bordeaux replies, more than the news, Dr. Gill, all of it. And our watchers write condensed reports that... You see, it's all TV out there, life, everything. Outsiders are spectators. They don't expect everything to happen. They expect everything to happen to them. And they don't want to do more than turn a switch. They want to sit back and let life happen to them. They watch the Late Late Show and turn off their TVs. Then they go to bed to sleep, which is a form of turning themselves off, just like the TV. The trouble is, their Late Late Show is often later than they think. There's a desperation in not being able to recognize this, Dr. Gill. Desperation leads to violence. There comes a morning for almost every one of those poor people outside when they realize that life has not happened to them, no matter how much TV they've watched. Life has not happened because they didn't take part in it. They've never been on stage, never had anything real. It was all illusion. Delusion. Dyson absorbed the intensity of the words, their meaning, and what lay under them. There was a terrifying sense of truth in Bordeaux's words. So they get turned off, Dyson murmured. It's all TV, Bordeaux said. Dyson turned his head, looked out the window. We really ought to eat something, Dr. Gill, Bordeaux said. And so, yes, that was all I wanted to read on those pages. So this is really, really true, right? The temporary tax, right? That's what taxation was. Like originally there was no income tax. And when it first started, it was only on the rich and it was only 1%. Now, it's like the average person, even a lot of fairly poor people pay more than 1% tax. And the rich pay, some of the rich, not all of them, but a lot of them will pay 30% in taxes. That's insane. It really is like they introduce evil gradually and it seems harmless. That's why you got to be able to extrapolate. You got to be able to see the horror coming down the pike if we let the government continue to control code. You got to see the horror coming down the pike if we let government take control of reproduction by allowing them to continue their misandric laws and all the rest of it. You got to see, the horror that will be coming down the pike, 30 to 50, maybe even longer, more years after they passed this little tiny thing that some people are saying is horribly evil, and most people are saying, oh, it's not that bad. That's just, fear-mongering and blah, blah, blah. And then it says the necessary little war. Yeah, exactly. You remember how they marketed the Iraq War? I remember reading about it in a book. I can't remember which book it was, but it talked about how originally the advisor to Bush was saying, "Yeah, we could go into this war and it'll only cost us like I can't remember what he said, 50 million, 100 million bucks or something." He thought it would cost like hardly any money. He also said it would I can't remember how long he thought it would take, but they thought that war would be over super, super fast, like a few months or maybe a year or something. They thought they would be in and out of Iraq. Not the fucking, I don't know what it was, 15 or more year nightmare. And then Afghanistan, goddamn, dude, we've been in there for 19 years now. 19 years we've been occupying that country, basically. It's fucking crazy. This is absolutely true. The temporary tax, the necessary little war, the temporary brutality that will cease as soon as certain conditions, end. The government agency created for the permanent interim. Exactly, that's how it is. You cede a little bit of freedom, and they will make it permanent. They will act like, oh yeah, we're just got to take a little bit of freedom, just temporarily, just for your own good, and then they never, ever, ever give it up. Just like the chick at the end of the Hunger Games, President Coin. She's like, well, the people are too riled up right now. I'm going to declare myself interim president. And then the guy played by Woody Harrelson is like, and just how long is this interim going to be? And she's like, we have no way of knowing that. But it's clear that the people are just too riled up right now, too emotional. We'll have elections when the time is right. This is well known. This has happened in countries. Like a dictator, a coup happens. The guy takes power through violence or whatever, overthrows the old government, and then he says, we're going to have elections and stuff, but I'm going to be temporary president for a while, and then it never happens. He just becomes permanent dictator of the country. This is really, really how it is. But as far as everything, like outsiders being spectators and their life just being TV, well, why is this? People can't go out and explore life anymore the way that they could. Even, and he was talking about this in the fucking, when did this book come out? Probably the 80s, maybe earlier, maybe the 70s. Let's see here. 1968 is when this book came out. First published in a shorter version in 1967. So things were infinitely more free, and people were infinitely more prosperous back then. And yet he was still saying this back then. But now, because of poverty and lack of freedom, people really don't have any choice but to be, have life just happen to them, be slaves to TV, because you can't just, set out and wander the country and survive. It's just too expensive to survive, and like, you used to be able to, just get a place to stay for the night for really, really cheap. So you could save up a little bit of money and then travel around and stuff, staying at these really cheap places to stay. But now you can't really do that. Or if you do, it's way, way, way more expensive than it used to be. So really, everybody's just trying to financially survive these days. So how can you have life happen to you? How can you explore? How can you learn? How can you do anything, really, if you're so financially enslaved you can barely move? It really is a case of like that movie In Time, where all the poor people are stuck in their district, and then to get out of the district, you got to pay a toll, a big, really expensive toll. And none of them can afford to pay it, so they're stuck in their super poor ghetto district. And then the people above that, in the next district, they have to pay an even bigger toll to get out of their district and get to the even more rarefied, nicer district, all the way up to the super expensive, nice district of the super rich. And what's his name is gifted 118 years, or no, 114 years, whatever it is. He's gifted with over 100 years by Henry Hamilton. Justin Timberlake's character is in that movie. And that allows him to pay the toll to get out of there and to, move all the way up to New Greenwich, the place where all the rich live and stuff. And then he's able to survive and make his life after that super easily. He plays poker with like the equivalent of a billionaire in that society. This guy who's got literally 1,000,000 years, and in that movie, time is money, literally. And so you can live as long as you can live forever if you have enough time, which is basically the same thing as having enough money. And so he plays poker with the guy, and because he's so savvy, because he's grown up in a ghetto, and people in the ghetto are really sharp because they have to be to survive, he's able to win at poker against this really, really, powerful, astute, smart guy. And then he wins 1,000 years. And so, then he's rich for the rest of his life after that. But of course things go wrong, and then the cops are after him and all that. But my point is, it really is like that. Like they keep people separated from each other, and everybody's locked down in a way that, and the lockdown is just increasing more and more and more and more. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. And of course, nothing good comes from this, and it's not even necessary. Like I was talking about earlier, about how, like, it really is the case that, like, all the advantages that you get from selling out to the Illuminati and stuff are things that you could have and used to have in the past. But now they've taken away your freedom, so they can buy your freedom with offering you freedom that you should have had automatically anyway, because people of the past automatically had freedom. You see, so this is really how it is. This is really how it is. It's really truly horrifying when you think about what they've done to the world. Let's see here. Okay, and then here's another quote from Santaroga Barrier. It says, one of the faceless gods produced a thundering whisper in Dyson's skull. This is my commandment given unto you. A poor man cannot afford principles, and a rich man doesn't need them. Which is something that I think I've said before. The poor, they don't have morality because they can't afford to. They have to survive no matter what, so they throw away their morals a lot of times. Whereas the people at the top, they don't need morality, because they're above it all, because they're so rich, and this is just really, really horrible, And then another quote from the Santaroga Barrier says, societies don't believe they can die, Piaget said. It must follow that a society as such does not worship at all. If it cannot die, it'll never face a final judgment. And if it'll never face judgment, Dyson said, it can do things as a society that'd be too much for an individual to stomach. Perhaps, Piaget muttered, perhaps. So this is really interesting, I thought, and quite true. This is really how America functions these days. It really acts as if the Illuminati or technology or America itself is some kind of god, because it goes on forever, because it's just a name. A name imputed to a collection of a bunch of people that are constantly being born and getting old and dying and replaced, but there's always someone living on this land, and they're always calling it America. And so, it's like this entity. It's, government is an entity, and corporations are an entity, and these entities can go on forever and ever and ever, and so they really do feel like they have impunity, and they really do act in horrific ways. And then another page of the Santaroga Barrier says, it has been noted, Piaget said, that sewer peak load times tend to match station breaks on TV. An elementary fact you can recognize with only the briefest reflection. But it's only a short step from this elementary fact to the placement of flow meters in the sewers as a quite accurate check on the available listening units at any given moment. I have no doubt that this is already being done. It's so obvious. Now reflect a moment on the basic attitudes toward their fellow men of people who would do this sort of thing, as opposed to those who could not find it in themselves to do it. Dyson cleared his throat. Here was the core of Santaroga's indictment against the outside. How did you use people? With dignity, or did you tap their most basic functions for your own purposes? The outside began to appear more and more as a place of irritating emptiness and contrived blandishments. That is so true. I'm really beginning to see things as a Santarogan, Dyson thought. There was a sense of victory in the thought. It was what he had set out to do as part of his job. It isn't surprising, Piaget said, to find the N-square law from warfare being applied to advertising and politics, other kinds of warfare, you see, with no real conversion problem from one field to the other. Each had its concepts of concentration and exposure. The mathematics of differentials and predictions apply equally well, no matter the field of battle. So that was what I wanted to read on that page. I think this is really, really true, right? Like, they absolutely, and similar to this whole, like, metering the sewers so you can tell how many people are watching TV and stuff. Similarly, like, I read some articles a few years ago about how they can now tell, like, who's in the house and maybe even which people are in the house by, like, the technology, like the electricity meter and different things like that. Like, just by monitoring your electricity or what was it, like, other things like that, like all this kind of stuff. This just makes it so that they can tell when you're home and probably even who is home. It's really, really terrifying. Like once they have computers in the faucets, like they're starting to do. I saw some commercial for some faucet that you can just tell it like, all right, now pour 100 milliliters of water into this bucket, into this thing. I want 100 milliliters of water or whatever, and then the faucet will pour exactly that much. Okay, but what else is it recording? It's probably recording like how much in general is poured, even if you don't use the audio setting to tell the thing how much water to pour out. And then, different people use different amounts of water. So even just if you're using such a faucet and you're just eyeballing it, how much water to pour out to fill up your bucket so you can make pasta or whatever, like you're probably going to use roughly the same amount of water every time. Whereas, your wife or your kids or whatever, they're going to use different amounts of water to make that same pasta because either they want more or less pasta or they just like boiling it with more or less water. And then just from the record in the faucet, of that stuff, and it'll probably store all that information all without your knowledge. And then, just from recording all that data and stuff, they will be able to tell, who is at home at what time. And then soon they'll be like, they'll be able to tell, like, if there's a murder committed and they think someone in your house did it or you might have done it or whatever, they'll get some kind of warrant or something, and then they'll get the data from your faucet on who was home, as well as the data about the refrigerator and how long each person on average stays as they in looking in the refrigerator as they open the fridge, and then they'll be able to tell who that was because of the average length of time they always spend with the door open, and all the rest of it, and then they'll be able to tell who is home from that data, without anything else. Not to mention the black boxes in the cars and the cell phones, which are tracking devices, even when they're turned off, which a lot of people don't realize. And it's not like they advertise that fact on TV shows. They're actually a lot of times intentionally deceptive about how much you're tracked. They never mention the black boxes in the cars when someone commits a murder and they're able to get away with it. And I see them driving around some modern car, and I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Those cars are tracking devices just as much as the phone is. And yet they never tell you that on TV shows and stuff. It's all control. It really is all control. It's really horrifying. And like you said here, the outside began to appear more and more as a place of irritating emptiness and contrived blandishments. That is absolutely true. It's all just distraction. It's not entertainment. It's brainwashing and distraction. That's what TV shows and music and all the rest of it are. It's moral degradation so as to get you to waste your money, not be cohesive, hurt each other, and therefore they're getting the public to be divided against itself, so we can't unite against them, the 1% who are running off with all the money, like George Carlin said. They want to degenerate us so as to divide us against them. Divide us against each other so we don't unite against them. They want to, control us and surveil us and know everything about us so they can manipulate us more effectively. It's just truly horrifying when you see what they have done and their goals and their lack of morality and just, it's all control. It's all control and manipulation and exploitation. That's really what it all is. And it'll just get worse and worse and worse and worse if we don't fight back against them and overthrow the government and form our own commune or no-go zone that becomes its own country. You see, it really is like that. And then another page I wanted to read in the Santaroga Barrier says, the thought, he says, how far do I go in becoming a Santarogan before I turn back, he wondered. I have a duty to Celador and the ones who hired me. When do I make my break? Because he's been taking Jaspers, and it's sort of starting to make him think like a Santarogan and make him sort of take the Santarogan peoples aside instead of the people who he was hired by to sell the Santarogans out to. He was hired to, investigate the Santarogans and go back and give the secrets to his bosses. But now he's starting to go native, And then he says the thought filled him with a deep revulsion against returning to the outside, but he had to do it. There was a thick feeling of nausea in his throat, a pounding ache at his temples. He thought of the irritant emptiness of the outside, piecemeal debris of lives, egos with sham patches, a world almost devoid of anything to make the soul rise and soar. There was no substructure to life outside, he thought. No underlying sequence to tie it all together. There was only a shallow, glittering roadway signposted with flashy, hypnotic diversions, and behind the glitter, only the bare board structure of props and desolation. That is absolutely how it is. It's like, what kind of person would think that, Las Vegas is somewhere fun? It's just, it's just the most emptiest and shallow of bullshit. You know what I mean? It's just flashing lights. Just it's just a bunch of emptiness and misery and retardedness. I mean, who would like that? You know what I mean? Like you'd have to be an idiot. But that's what they do. They shove this retarded bullshit down our throats and call it entertainment. They charge us for it. They charge us for our own brainwashing. It's truly horrifying. You know, I mean, we got to resist this shit, but people don't seem to want to. You know, they want to keep watching TV. They want to keep watching movies. They want to keep listening to music, etc. You know, they want to keep being brainwashed because they're tired from working their jobs. And it's like, I don't want to fight. I don't want to risk my life. You know, it's not that bad. Or Jesus is coming back. I don't have to worry about it. Once saved, always saved. Fuck you. That's fucking retarded. You know, it's like have some balls, have some integrity, and fight the evil, enslaving, horrific system. You don't like non-heterosexuality and all the horrific degeneracy? Well, that stuff is being empowered by your apathy, you know? And then and that's being pushed on everybody else, all the straight people too. I'm going to do a video in the future here. I did a really long note on my voice recorder about how they're going to force all, like the bottom 70% of men into prostitution, gay prostitution. They're going to do that shit coming in the next 50 to 100 years if genetic engineering doesn't get here first. Hopefully it does so that everybody's smart enough to still have jobs. But if everybody's jobless, you know, in like 20, 30 years, like if 70% of men are jobless at that point, they're going to force all the men into male prostitution for all the homosexuals at the top who like to churn and burn guys. I mean, it's going to be utterly horrific if you think about the future that's coming down the pike. This is not something to be apathetic about. This is something to fight with all your might.